Bronya and Tingyun are widely considered to be the best Harmony supports in Honkai Star Rail right now, so today I want to look at both of them and see who I think is the best Harmony support character. So, to start out with Bronya. Now, Bronya is really good at boosting damage and having some other benefits to her. So, her skill will boost the damage of one ally of your choice, plus it cleanses any debuffs on them, and it also completely advances their action. So what this means is she's going to allow whichever character she chooses to act immediately, and they'll have increased damage when they act, which is really big because you're basically getting extra turns, especially if you have the right speed tuning and your characters have the proper speeds. To be able to basically have an extra turn, and have even more extra turns with extra damage as well, which is really nice. And if you have E6 Bronya, which, if you're a free-to-play player, you're probably nowhere near that, but Bronya's skill damage boost does last for an extra turn with her E6, so that's also something to keep in mind if you are a whale, or if you do spend money and you have an E6 Bronya. But then for Bronya's ultimate, she boosts the party's attack and crit damage for 2 turns, and the crit damage boost is based on a percentage of her own crit damage. And this is going to be really good, especially pairing with Bronya's skill, because if your DPS that you're focusing on for that team has a good crit rate, you're just going to be giving them even more crit damage and attack on top of what they already have, so their damage is going to be going way up, especially if you pair that with Bronya's skill with the normal damage increase. And, because of the way Bronya works, her build is actually pretty simple. The only stats you really need to focus on for her, for the most part, are going to be crit damage to increase her ultimate's crit damage increase. And you want to, have the amount of speed that you think is going to be, beneficial based on the team that you're running. I don't have those numbers, just off the top of my head for, specific speed values, and it might, differ for whichever team you're running. But that is pretty much my overview of Bronya. So now to move into Tingyun. So Tingyun, she is on a similar vein as Bronya, able to increase the damage of your DPS. She just has different ways of doing it, and different specific benefits that she does that Bronya doesn't. Starting out with Tingyun's skill. So her skill will boost one character's attack for 3 turns, and then during those 3 turns, whenever that character attacks an enemy, they'll also deal an additional amount of lightning damage based on a percentage of the attacker's attack stat, which is pretty cool. You get some extra damage and based off of the DPS's attack rather than Tingyun's, which is good. Even though Tingyun, does build attack for, the Tingyun build, and her damage boosts scale off of her attack. And because her skill will last for 3 turns, you don't need to use your skill points as often, and really with Tingyun you shouldn't, because her skill is only active on the most recent character you used your skill on. So if let's say for example, you're running a team with, like a DPS, a sub DPS, Tingyun, and then a healer. If you use Tingyun's skill on your sub DPS, and then even if you have 2 turns left, you use it again on your main DPS, it'll go back up to 3, but that sub DPS won't have the support anymore. So you really just want to focus this on your main DPS. And if you're able to do that, you're going to be using less skill points overall, which I think is very good, especially for, characters like Imbibitor Lunae that use a lot of skill points. And, if you just have a team that's very skill point hungry, Tingyun is going to be a really good option to be able to lower the amount of skill points that other characters are using, so you can focus those skill points more on your DPS. Then for Tingyun's ult, she increases the damage that one ally will do on their next attack, and also she'll let them recover 50 energy. And this is really good for, being able to get your ult back faster. And, some characters do have some lower energy charges. I think typically for DPSs, they'll be anywhere from 120 to 140. So being able to recover, just below half of the energy needed for their ultimate is going to be very good, and, very useful for just dealing a lot of damage. And if you can time it right to where Tingyun's ult will give your DPS their ultimate, then they can do some pretty insane damage on their turn with the ultimate plus, their attack if Tingyun's skill is up. And then very similarly to Bronya, Tingyun's build is pretty simple, outside of, speed tuning, for, where you want to have Tingyun, although she does require a little less speed tuning, just based on how her skill works. But for Tingyun, you pretty much just focus on boosting her attack as much as possible, because her buffs are going to focus on her attack. So having her attack up really high is going to be really good. I do need to build my Tingyun more. I am kind of working on some of my Harmony characters right now to give them better relics. So yeah, I am excited to try to use Tingyun again once I have her built up more. But my conclusion on what I think between the two of them, who I think is the best Harmony character, I do think that it depends on the type of team you're running. Because Tingyun, I think, is more universally usable and works well, a lot better universally. Whereas Bronya is a lot more of, she works very well with specific characters. Because with Bronya, you're using her, using her skill a lot. So you're gonna be running her on teams that aren't using as many skill points. They don't have to be completely not using skill points at all. But I think if you're running her with DPSs Blade, I think is very good with Bronya. Seela is an exception because she uses a good amount of skill points, but I do think Bronya is her best support. But when you get to Tingyun, for certain characters, like Jingliu and Imbibitor Lunae, for characters that really need to use their skill points every time, you're going to want to run Tingyun, since she's not going to be taking up as many of the skill points. And both their buffs are still very good. So, realistically, if you have the option to pick both of them, or, if you only have Tingyun, for example, have a Bronya, or you have a Bronya and don't have a Tingyun, they're both still going to perform very well. It's just that Bronya is not as universal as Tingyun is, so that is something to keep in mind. There are some DPSs that Bronya is not going to work as well with, but both of them are still very solid Harmony units. So yeah, I definitely want to see what you all think of these two in the comments down below. But with that, I'm going to end off here. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, definitely be sure to hit the like button, comment, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell. But I will see you all next time.